that's one of my favorite parts of the movie, because it's one of the most crucial parts of the original story in exactly what you're saying. The first man that can survive the water of life and can look where all the women are too scared to look.
Because in the book it's way more of like there's this
supernatural.
When we're talking about the prescience and the supernatural, it's
Welcome back to another podcast with the Fate Boys. I'm Ian.
I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
We are the Fate Boys.
And we're joined today with a special guest, our first guest officially on the podcast, Max Brandell, a dear friend of mine. Max, give him a little taste. Who are you? What are you about?
Thanks. I don't know. I guess you'll get to know me in this podcast. I'm a father. My daughter's over there. I've been friends with Ian for about 15 years or so. And a huge Dune geek.
Awesome. So that's a great lead into what we're talking about today. Today is all about Dune. And hashtag spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the second or first movie or read the books, we're going to be
screwed.
Proceed. Just go watch it, go read it, and then come back and listen to this podcast, because we're going to be going into a lot of different topics covering different philosophies and I don't know, like everything under the sun, and the things that impacted us the most, the things that we like the most. We have a couple people who've read the book. Has everyone read the book besides me?
I have read all the books.
Max has definitely
read an audiobook to everything.
Okay.
Nice.
Awesome. I have read none of it. So for people who are not readers, I am Team U.
I'm also a nerd, and I looked at the wiki before I even finished reading the book to kind of see
Spice notes.
There's a lot of
Spice notes.
Spice notes. Yeah.
That's great.
I think there's a Spice wiki actually. There's a Dune wiki. Right?
Yeah.
There has to be.
Yeah.
So that's where I got more info on the Haderach and everything.
Cool.
Awesome. So Max, what do you love about Dune? Like, what makes you so obsessed about it?
You know, I was born in 1984. And so the movie was around when I was a kid, and my father, I guess, liked it because he was into sci-fi. So it was always kind of on in my house. It was on throughout the years, and I always loved it. And I didn't know why until I was older, which is, around 19 or 20, I started to develop a more mystical side. And I think Dune, what I love about Dune is the mysticism in it more than anything. It has a deep tone of spirituality. In my experience, the supernatural, and a really epic, interesting, nerdy, if you're a sci-fi person, story. The details and the nuance and the intrigue and the social relationships and it's such a great take on humanity. I think it's one of the better stories ever told, actually, if you know the whole thing.
Yeah, so just the breadth and depth of how wide and deep they go into all these different facets and telling of humanity and the different interactions.
And the story goes about 20,000 years from start to finish.
Wow.
In detail.
That's right.
Whoa.
And it's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard in my life.
That speaks to the world building capacity of Frank Herbert, I don't know much about him, but wow. When you think of authors like Tolkien or Lewis, that have really created something.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the hero's journey, and that kind of is probably in any good story, but there's some people that are able to just encompass it in a certain way, because there's that spirituality, but you're saying 20,000 years in detail. That's what it's you can go in, and it's almost like its own world. You really.
Well, speaking of the world, it's you're telling the stories of these amazingly deep and nuanced characters, but it's also the story of the planet Dune itself. And in order to tell the story of the character of Arrakis, you need 20,000 years minimum.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the special things about it is I was talking to a lady about this, and it starts with Earth.
Really?
It starts with Earth.
I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, the Dune universe starts with Earth. It's an Earth that's very, very similar, not exactly similar to this Earth, but might as well be. And that's where the story begins, and it goes forward 20,000 years. So it's a story of where humanity goes and why for the next 20,000 years. I've never seen anything like it. It's incredible. And it was written in 1965. Well, 1960, really. You probably started working it and published it in 1965.
Oh, that early? I thought it was like maybe closer to 70.
Well, I mean, it basically goes into, it's an AI story, but also that how we abolish AI out of our society and out of our humanity, and why we abolish our AI, and how the AI takes over, and how it basically fucks us up for 10,000 years in a horrible way. And that's why there's not a lot of computers. That's why they fight with knives, is because
they have
humanity
ships.
has gone through this horror with AI that it has just come to the point where they have to abolish it. It's hunted down throughout the universe and not allowed. So we start fresh. And what emerges is superhuman abilities and religions and sort of culty different houses. And it's fascinating.
Well, what I thought was interesting is you're talking about the AI aspect, but it's like, where's the balance of technology versus, right? They have these crazy ships and their interstellar travel and all this stuff, and yet they're fighting with knives. Like they're not. There were those guns like we saw when they're destroying. It's like a laser that destroys the harvesters, but that's really few and far between that they're using that.
Yeah, that's a little. That I need a little explanation as somebody who kind of knows most of the story, because laser guns, which was the evolution of guns, in that point in humanity, were actually banned because when you hit the shields that they all wear, there's a nuclear reaction. So they're everybody. It's like another.
Let's not do that.
We're not doing laser guns or guns because it has a nuclear reaction with these shields. But there's lots of lasers in Denis Villeneuve's version, so I'm a little like, how does that work? But I need a little explaining.
Yeah, the weaponry is an interesting factor of it. I obviously, as a martial artist and someone who really appreciates really good fight scenes, the sword fighting scenes were crazy phenomenal.
Yeah,
like holy crap! Like, so I'm a huge martial arts movie fan, and watching it, how it's been filmed over time and how people approach it. Obviously, a huge Bruce Lee fan. And looking at how they captured the different fight tactics, like the Sardaukar, and like their whole thing about having this legendary warrior class, which would be an interesting thing to talk about too, because you gave me some backstory on that, which I had
Sardaukar,
and like why they're so feared and why they're so ruthless. And then obviously you have the Harkonnens, who are just all about like that whole just brutal mentality, brutality being their main thing of just like, I don't care, I'm gonna just keep going forward.
It's a maniacal society. The more horrific you are, the more scheming, the more you move up in society.
In the class, right? So like what's valued in the society. And then you have the Fremen, where you have Duncan, Idaho, Mr. Momoa crushing it. In the first one, who like obviously has traded blades with Sardaukar, so he like knows it. They fear him. He's known across the galaxy. Like apparently, like people have heard his name.
Yeah, well, because his story goes back to being an orphaned boy. I think his mother was slaughtered in front of him by the Harkonnens, and then he escapes. They were going to kill him too, but he escapes as a boy and like runs around in the jungle in the desert being hunted by Harkonnens, and he kills 9 of them as a boy.
Wow.
And I think he's eventually imprisoned by them for a while, escapes again, and then develops his own kind of like superhuman legacy, and eventually House Atreides sees him,
and they're like, we want that dude.
Yeah, and they train him up, and they put him in their army to train.
Which no slouches either, right? Like the Atreides house is also like amazing, like really good at warfare, but you see them just getting got by the Sardaukar in the first one when they're just like walking up the stairs. There's like 12 of them, and they're just like sit, cleaning the blade as they're
doing
like
what the Harkonnens couldn't do in that scene.
Exactly, just like bringing them forward, and then you have him talking about Duncan, Idaho, talking about the Fremen. When he meets them, he goes into the desert to find them because he flies ahead of time, right? To find them to try to parlay. And he's like, they are demons,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I haven't fought anyone.
They're all tripping. They're all psychedelically high, like all the time. So they're just in this different zone. So when they fight, it's like, whoa.
And they're like
Yeah.
wild humans.
Totally.
too.
Right.
Yeah. That have fought
Yeah.
for their entire, I mean, I think the Fremen had like 1,000-year culture of fighting the people taking their spice from their planet.
And that's how they show leadership
Yeah.
ability too, is through their ability
Yeah.
to fight one-on-one in ritual combat.
Yeah.
Um,
It's holy for them.
Right.
It's
And
where they
how
live.
close it is. Like, I mean, I don't know. I know you guys study like Kali, and I've just seeing like that the sword length isn't. It's like a medium
It's a long
sword,
knife.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a long knife, and that but not just the Fremen, but also the Sardaukar, and you're like, it's like no fucks given. Like, I'm going in. You know, it's like the Marines.
coming
It's
out of the
super-
sand.
It's not like, oh, I'm gonna find a way. It's like I'm just gonna get up close and
Yeah.
It's super tactical, like when you think about it, because it's a hybrid between like a long and short range weapon. Like, you have to be close to do damage with it, but it does work
It's
at
very
like
personal.
at a certain distance.
Max, I have a question. In Duncan Idaho's upbringing, I think he was in the fighting pits. The
Probably
Harkonnens
at
had
some
him
point,
enslaved.
yeah. I think that's right.
Is that when he developed or became a part of the Zen Sunni philosophy? Do you remember that?
I don't remember.
It was
that
like
part
a
of it.
warrior, philosopher, mystical path
Yeah.
that allowed him to become the swordsman and battle strategist
Mhm.
that he became, and then he
sense.
passes that on
Yeah.
to Paul and the Atreides troops, which makes them more legendary and combat capable than the other houses.
Right. Yeah, it's phenomenal. I
Yeah,
love
it's like
that.
the Bushido,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. You're living the way of the warrior. The
Mhm.
idea that you're taking that level of dedication to that craft in every aspect of it.
It makes sense with his, him being an orphan, and I don't know that he would dedicate himself to a martial art, to like a philosophy like that. You need something, right? You
Yeah.
need some family.
Some kind of code.
Yeah,
and that
some kind of
shows like the whole brings a good conversation around like this balance, and then maybe the spiritual elements of how, like, Harkonnens and the Atreides being connected, and yet how the difference of style, like that fighting pit, that I mean, watching
deviation. Yeah.
what is the
arena scene.
The arena scene, it was very like, I was like, oh, it's like Gladiator, right?
Yeah.
And essentially just like that, it's just brutality, war, society versus Atreides having that like
nobility.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost more like feels Japanese
But
or
isn't it?
something, where it's like it's honor and respect, and
Right.
that these guys are fighting the hardest as any hard guys, but like they actually respect their king or their
Right.
duke or whoever.
But the
Yes.
Harkonnens were kind of a farce in that arena scene and in general, because the enemies are drugged. So Feyd-Rautha isn't even
Right.
facing the legitimate opponent, and you can tell that the Atreides would not do it that
Well, they
way.
harness fear, and
Yeah.
like they're able to cause fear even in other people just from that, the way they work in society. But it's like that fear versus like true respect.
Right.
Love and loyalty.
What?
Just the slurping in the corner from our
Oh yeah.
our little rugrat over there.
So I just actually learned this recently. But the Atreides and Harkonnen actually worked together, and one, I can't remember the first names of each of them, but they were two of the first leaders to rebel against the AI and have success against them.
Oh.
So they were elevated in society because they started to defeat this AI machine
Are those in the
army.
prequel books?
Yeah, this
right?
is like Butlerian jihad stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And so they really emerged out of that, and then their houses kind of went different ways, even though they were related.
That's why I was like, I'll probably have to read the books for that, but it's like a big discovery in the movie about like dun dun, oh, they're actually related. How the fuck is
Right.
that?
The bloodlines.
Yeah,
And
because
she
it's like
knows.
everyone's forgotten except a few.
I can give it away. So this is a big spoiler.
Yes. Yes.
The reason Vladimir Harkonnen is on suspensors and really obese and sick is a really incredible story. So he was like a stud when he was younger, like shredded, good looking, very, very healthy, still like maniacal, and moved his way up in the Harkonnen society. I guess a lot like Feyd-Rautha, but I think even bigger. And he was seen as the Bene Gesserits as a good person to get genes from.
Candidate for that, yeah.
A candidate. So they wanted his genes. And I think it's actually Helen Mohayem, who's the lead Bene Gesserit in the new Dune movies. What'd you call her? Space Witch?
Space Granny.
Space
Granny. So she's the head Space Granny.
So when Space Granny was younger, she was sent, like Lady Fenring was sent to Fade, to try to seduce him and get his genes. Now, what isn't said in the new movies, but is crystal clear, is that Vladimir Harkonnen is gay. He likes men.
Okay.
He likes men. So when she goes to try to seduce him, it doesn't go very well.
He's like, nah.
He's like, I don't know.
He's not phased at all.
You can talk to me, but I'm like not into this.
Right.
But she I think she finds some leverage with him about the Emperor. She has to get some shit on him, and they end up having sex, and he hates it. There's this whole thing where actually Piter, who's Vladimir Harkonnen's assistant, he's the Mentat assistant, watches them.
They
having
would.
sex.
It's so weird.
Anyway, the deed is done, but she doesn't get pregnant.
Interesting.
So she has to go back a second time, and she tries to get some more dirt on him to make him do it, and it doesn't quite work, and he ends up violently raping her.
Oh shit!
In this horrible way. So it still technically counts, and he beats the shit out of her, and it's this horrible rape. But as he's raping her with her Bene Gesserit powers, she actually transmutes a disease to him. And for the rest of his life, he becomes morbidly obese and sick and weak.
Wow.
And I think she gets pregnant with Jessica.
Yeah.
I think that's Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's really is her mother or whatever.
Yes.
Physically.
Wow.
Yes. I think that's the story.
Amazing. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That changes a lot of things, because I know that there's the one scene in the first movie, and obviously it's a book, of when you have her coming in and they're speaking in the little dome thing, and there's a little creature, which is the whole other side thing, right? There's a whole species that people breed for fun or whatever.
Oh, that's
and she's like, can you have him leave? Can you have that thing leave? Get out of the space. And they're like, oh, they don't understand your language. And she uses the voice, the big bad grumble voice, and it leaves. She's like, oh, it understands well enough.
So that's a Tleilax. It's not a clone, but the Tleilax are a whole planet that deal with genetic splicing and cloning and making genetic materials for genetic beings out of splicing different organisms. That will come really big into Messiah, as we'll find out.
Okay.
But their whole planet is the lore of their planet is
just Teddy.
So they're probably
fucking interesting.
I'm guessing really connected, or the Bene Gesserits are really in there, because isn't the whole this whole plan of the Bene Gesserits?
Well, let's go into that. So that's something that we wanted to touch on too, is the whole lore or the background of the Bene Gesserit thing. They're the keepers of time. They're the keepers, kind of the steering of the ship of fate,
multi-generational
and destiny
plans
of this idea of they don't think in days or weeks or months or years. They think in centuries of what it's gonna do. And we see a little bit of that. We see it in both movies. One, we see the planning of it. We've been orchestrating this for thousands of years. Don't fuck it up. You went and had a boy, all that wasted.
They do fuck it up.
It goes back to me Star Wars 1,000-year plan to end the Jedi from the Sith, and I'm just I don't know that I feel the Bene Gesserit are that way. I'd say evil, but I'm kind of what is their intention here?
Though
they do have an agenda, obviously, but it's interesting because you see them talking about planning this thing out in time. And we know that they have some sort of clairvoyance or forethought into thinking about the future. And then we see in the second movie, the second part of book one, that they now are talking about what happens when she drinks the water of life, and what happens to Paul when he does that. And so it's a similar experience. And from what I've heard from talking to both of you all about the book perspective of it, is that they go equally into the level of impact of the spiritual progression of understanding of time on both directions, and seeing all the different threads of understanding the different timelines of possibility. And so you're connecting both past and future. Is that right?
Yes. in Denis Villeneuve's version, when Paul drinks the water of life, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie, because it's one of the most crucial parts of the original story in exactly what you're saying. So to become a Reverend Mother, I think they all have to drink water of life. Yeah. Certainly on Arrakis they do. And women can survive it. However, it is such a powerful sort of psychedelic, supernatural substance that there is a place that women are too scared to look. There is a place that women are too scared to look. And the Kwisatz Haderach is supposed to be the first man that can survive the water of life and can look where all the women are too scared to look.
I agree. I think that's where the book really, the movie wasn't able to get deep into the lore of that, because in the book it's way more of like, there's this supernatural. When we're talking about the prescience and the supernatural, it's like, the reason they're all female is because there's supposed to be this power that they have that men aren't able to necessarily do well, but that there is this prophesied male, and so maybe that's where their genetics lie. So that it's like, but they're willing to do it at all costs, because when that conversation in the movie with the Reverend Mother and Florence Pugh, however you say it, not a pug. But and then it's like, no, go, like, we're gonna get these Harkonnens, and you're like, why the genetics of these guys that are ruthless? Like, is that really gonna be the savior of the world? Or I
mean, as ruthless as the Harkonnens are, they're a power society. So as far as being able to be a power that can be manipulated and controlled from the outside, why not?
When you're talking about object power, right?
And that's what I loved about that concept of the Kwisatz Haderach, like I was mentioning before the show. Like, to me, my understanding, and from even the wiki, is like Frank Herbert was inspired by Kabbalistic imagery, and I love Kabbalah, and it's essentially the Adam Kadmon, the divine human. It's like, fulfilling the blueprint, because when the Emperor's like, your dad was weak, and then you knowing that Harkonnen and Atreides are the same, essentially, genetics, but it's like the balance, like pure power without any like heart, and then there's like the dad kind of got and the whole, because maybe they became a little weak from too much, and then we see Paul really have that BDE that, like,
he's the
when he goes too, and because I don't remember that part in the book, but when he's just like, nobody here can, step to me. And I'm like, dude, you're surrounded by like 1 million people.
They could all just take it.
They could all, yeah.
Yes, honey. You have something to say?
So, I'm not on camera, but it's fine.
From the shadows.
From the shadows, the Bene Gesserit speaks. Something that I found really like captivating about what you were just speaking about, especially Max, something that you touched on that I don't think we have in our plan to talk about today, but something that I felt like really came up strong is how focused Frank Herbert was on fear being the mind killer, and that whole quote around fear, and how like the water of life and the Kwisatz Haderach being the person, the masculine, who goes to the place where the women fear the most. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for me?
Yeah, let me think. Okay, so again, I loved part 2. But I left the theater and the day after, and I felt disappointed.
Yeah.
Because there is such a magic of spirituality that I felt in the first one. But I think it was dialed back in the second one.
Bless you.
That's my daughter sneezing. What was I going to say? We were talking about Kwisatz Haderach.
Left disappointed.
The masculine goes where the Reverend Mothers have been afraid to go.
So the 1984 movie, when Paul takes the water of life, does such a better job at illustrating this transition, and it's so holy. So he does. So it's like this enlightenment, or this awakening. The sleeper has awakened is also this powerful part of the book. The sleeper has awakened. Nowhere in part 2,
not mentioned at all.
The sleeper has awakened is part of 1984, but the 1984 movie, but. So Paul's just this, basically prince noble prince that comes from House of Atreides, very well trained, incredible dude, very smart, blah 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 blah. But when he takes the water of life, it's this like totally different tier of his spiritual journey. He's really never ever the same.
Well, he's opened up to past and future, right? Like the idea he's opened up to the connection to the lineage of the Bene Gesserit, which he comes from.
So the lore of the Kwisatz Haderach is a mind that can bridge space and time, that can be all places at once. So, in other words, his consciousness opens to where he has an understanding of the universe that's more powerful than anything that's ever been seen before in the human race in all time. He just comes to an understanding of past and future and what's been here and where we're going that nobody has ever had before.
My understanding would be like that's what I'd equate to like Christ consciousness. It's like
basically, yeah. I mean, it's not specifically like I am God, but it's I am significantly more powerful than everybody else all of the time, and everybody else is like, yeah, you are.
But from like my readings of yoga, you know, like reading a lot of like Yogananda from the Kriya Yoga lineage, just talking about that like meditation and self-realization is reaching into that consciousnness of the atom, and that through that you have intuitive knowledge, because the microcosm being a reflection of the macrocosm, you're then able to attach like quantum entanglement, right? You're attached to everything in space and time.
Yes.
So that's like I love that part.
Yeah. I think I mean, I've had a ton of mystical experiences in my life, and the most I find the most useful though are actually the practical ones, when I can actually connect the dots of how to do life better in the practical realm.
Absolutely.
And I think Paul's is a little bit more like that. It's definitely not zero spirituality, but it's like it's more like implemented awakening.
Exactly. Yeah. I think even something that because like you were talking about in the book, and I remember feeling that like this like exploration of the inner consciousness that is really deep, but and then for what? For him to like bring peace to like the physical universe or world, right? It's not necessarily just about I'm gonna be a yogi and just meditate and I'm so cool, I have all these powers. It's like no, I need that to navigate. I'm thinking of the spice, you know, like they're using and we haven't seen those yet.
I know.
The navigators.
Yeah, don't get me into that.
But
that's another episode.
But like, you know, that like this psychedelic spice is allowing people to navigate, but and then there's this level that's above, which is like the Kwisatz Haderach, him able to navigate life for everyone.
So let's talk about how vehicles can travel through space. There are beings that are trained, and most of them don't make it, that take, I think they're humans, that take so much spice that their bodies actually mutate like dramatically and never being the same again. I think they can live thousands of years.
Okay.
And their consciousness expands so much that they can understand the quantum realms of space, that they can move ships through a fold.
That is insane.
They move it with their consciousness.
That is insane. That they're just warping space and time with their consciousness, and that's how they. So it's not like a fuel source, because that's how they lead it. You to believe in the first one, because there's
a shame,
because they're like drilling, right? It says like drilling for oil, right? They're collecting spice.
Super high spice people.
Super high spice people.
They're creating like wormholes, essentially, I guess.
Their consciousness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And on the notion of the worms, the navigators, when they ingest that much spice, they become like Shai Hulud in a way. They describe it in the books as like fish-like.
Yeah.
Don't they?
Yeah.
It's very distorted looking.
But they have to be kept in tanks.
They have to be kept in tanks.
Yeah. They become creature-like.
Yes.
In viscous gas that they float in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you speak maybe a little bit on in this 20,000 year journey about the discovery of Arrakis, right? Because it starts in Earth. And maybe somehow they use ships to propel, and then all of a sudden, because Arrakis changes, you know, the whole empire.
It does. So the first mention of spice in the Dune timeline, as far as I know it, is near the peak of our humanity before we started to rely heavily on AI. There was just some mention of a geriatric spice in Arrakis, but I think the discovery of it, like, it takes us thousands of years to figure out what it can actually do.
Sure. I think that's true for a lot of different resources, right? It's like
Yeah.
it comes out, you think you're going to use it for this purpose,
Yeah.
and then you find a new use for it, or you discover a trick on it, like by testing it or whatever, and you're like, oh, snap, we can use it for that?
Yeah, so the tale goes that humanity it starts to explore other solar systems by itself and actually becomes incredibly efficient. We actually like start to run and work at a level that we've never worked at before. Wealth is distributed, resources are distributed, and we start to work together and actually conquer our solar system and then a few other solar systems.
Okay.
And then we start to make that work really, really well, and basically everybody gets fat and complacent.
Wall-E syndrome.
And then they figure out how to have an incredibly good quality of life without the effort, with their reliance on machines, with the reliance on AI, and it becomes less reliance, more dependence. And then we start fusing with machines, where it's like our greatest Leonardo da Vinci's kind of get downloaded into a computer, into a robot, and then that person can kind of live forever, get new parts, but their consciousness continues.
So it keeps building upon.
And so a lot of those people sort of raise to society in our political sphere, and then eventually it starts to, there's rebellions against that, and then eventually it starts to self-evolve. So it's not even based on a person anymore. It's a self-learning computer.
So how does the Bene Gesserit fall into that?
Come out of,
yeah.
So this is about 8,000 years before the Bene Gesserit come to play.
Okay. So that makes sense, because you're seeing like a natural like through line. If you were to imagine where we're at right now, even if we want to contextualize it with where we're just seeing the kind of birth of AI coming into our sphere. And right now we're using it to like generate images and write up documents for us and stuff. But obviously we're also seeing it
farming, driving,
right,
cooking,
medical devices,
and where that could go. And I could see, and I hear that a lot with like the fear from people who have that trepidation around it of like, if you get too comfortable or reliant on that as the driver, what the implications could be for humans is very terrifying.
But the question is always like, do you use the technology because it also is for good? Like it's
right. Well,
there's
the benefit of it, but then you're also going to have to kind of weigh out the risk of it. So, like coming back to the storyline of, okay, so we're at 8,000 years before this is even a thing. We're drawing that natural thread of like, okay, these things are coming online. People are becoming more and more dependent upon it. We have more freedom because we don't have to work. We don't have to these types of things. And then we get to a certain point where, how does a cult level religious sister motherhood get birthed out of that kind of?
So the story, there's a wrestle between rebellions and AI and empires, and one rebellion in particular called the Titans displaces everything and then starts using the AI and then starts merging with the AI, and then the AI takes over them.
Okay.
And then it gets to the point where humans become second class citizens and slaves to all machines.
That seems like the fear, right?
And that goes on for like, I think, a few thousand years, where the machines are just, if you're not a slave to us, they'll kill you, and they conquer like the universe.
Okay.
And it's so horrific that it gets to the point where a religion, a fundamentalist spiritual religion that is like martyrdom, that realizes we're going to die anyway, so the machines have to die at any cost.
Right.
And this fanatical uprising starts to actually get some progress with beating machines. And by the time they actually conquer the last mainframe, it's decided that no machines can be allowed to live anymore, because this has been like thousands of years of oppression. It's like everybody before us has been like, beat the machines and then we'll use them. There's no we'll using them anymore. Right. It's gone back and forth so many times. It's so ingrained into the history that it's zero.
I think that's interesting because it ties into this concept of, why would you use a navigator? Why would you use a human, or not necessarily a human, but like a biological life form,
right,
as a driving force, where it used to be a mechanization, right? It used to be a piston firing to drive an engine to do a thing. Why would you use a creature to then do that? I think that fits within that.
That's one of the answers. So I think in the story, Earth is actually nuked because it has a lot of the AI mainframes, and it's actually turned into slag. So we render our home and our origin into somewhere we can't live.
Mm-hmm.
And that shocks us. Historically, we lose a lot of our identity.
Sure.
We lose a lot of our history. And I think within a few hundred years, it's kind of like we start over. And the way that we start over with no tech, yet still this huge conscious evolution that we've been through thousands of years of progress from where we are now, things like the Bene Gesserit sisterhood form, the Telelilax form, the Atreides form, the Harkonnen form, House Carino, who's the emperor, forms.
They all find their own planets to kind of terraform,
and they're based on the fundamentalist leadership. There are nobles that lead the resistance against the AI. There are rebels. There are traders. There are merchants that all merge and get elevated because they beat the AI, and it changes and warps.
So one thing I've had that's fascinating. So one thing that I've been interested to talk to you about as well is how the fuck is there an emperor of all of this? Like, and it has this like samurai army that they have, which is a whole fascinating thing too, of how the Sardaukar come to be.
Because it's cool.
There's an explanation.
But because it's like, okay, so you get to the point where humanity is almost wiped out. Second class, you're only useful if you're useful to machines
for thousands of years.
And then you have this turn of the wheel, so to speak, where we've had to fight very fervently to get back to the top. And any person in that struggle who had ever seen any sort of like usefulness for machines, it gets kind of kicked out.
And what emerges and the why of how we're able to do that is via mysticism, via supernatural religious fervor.
Fascinating.
I love that.
Yeah.
That to me applies to the world today. And this is crazy, you know, like Frank Herbert wrote this in the 60s, and especially like science, like I think, you know, it was like that concept of like, oh, you know, flying cars, and you know, this like the future is going to be technology and it's going to be paradise, and yet it's like over and over, you know, now we're living in the future and we have great technology and there's these concerns around AI, but and then also in my own experience is like this human, or through us being humans, connecting with our inner, like a spiritual element that is able to guide us in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah.
I want to circle back on a bit that you said about technology making us fat and complacent. Mm-hmm. And I think Arrakis is a beautiful representation of wild human potential, like indigenous humanity living in a natural, harsh environment where evolutionary pressure is fierce, and it forces the mystical essence of humankind to come to the surface, which is why the Fremen are so badass compared to the rest, and yet, even compared to the Atreides. Like the Fremen are incredible.
They're like people that live at Burning Man.
Yeah. but they have this hope that pervades somehow. And I guess my question is that hope implanted from the Bene Gesserit, or did they have this vision?
Well, they've had all kinds of mystical like traditions and ways and beliefs and prayers and like priests and all kinds of stuff. As you can, I think Denis Villeneuve killed it in a positive way with the Fremen. The nuances and the layers of how the Fremen were depicted in his movie are better than the book. I think they're so fucking great.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that I was going to say is like if someone who hasn't read the books at all, and I watched the 1984 version like forever ago. Yeah. Don't remember it at all. But watching this newer take or rendition on it, the thing that I was most impressed by was just how visually striking. Mm-hmm. It was done, and it was in talking about one thing that I wanted to
every shot.
11 out of 10, dude.
It was just, seriously, and they filmed so much of it on location. Yeah, was another piece of it, which is kind of going back to
in Jordan, I think,
at a few different places,
a lot of different places,
a lot of different locations, and they had such a richness to having to be in the environment, dealing with the environment, and you get much more of a sense than being on a soundstage. Even though you can do some amazing stuff with stage work.
Yeah, it's so much harder,
but let's be real. Worth it, because it's like when you're getting those landscape shots, or when you're getting like the horizon, or the just the massive epicness of it, you are in awe. So if you go see it in IMAX, or we saw it in Dolby Atmos, so it was like a full body experience. Like holy shit, you know, like so like to have that impact visually, viscerally, and then I just have to say as a musician too, Hans Zimmer.
Yeah,
bro.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer, like
not surprised.
Even in the first movie, the Tibetan Buddhist evil version when they're in the Getty Prime or the Sardaukar or whatever, and he's like,
yeah, right.
I was just
so
like,
great.
I was
Throat
trembling,
singing,
bro.
yeah.
I was like, holy.
Dude, he like he's been my favorite. There's like 5 top composers, right, in Hollywood, and you can list them off. It's just like those are the ones who you go to if you're going to be making like a blockbuster A-list movie. It's like you get one of the 5. And Hans has been up there for forever since the beginning of his career, and has always had my heart. Because whenever I see a movie that he's done, even like when he did Spirit of the Cimarron, which was like a Disney movie, or maybe not Disney, maybe like DreamWorks or whatever. It was like an animated movie, but he went from doing The Ring to doing Spirit. So he went from like this deep.
You did The Ring?
I didn't know that.
Oh,
and so he went like really into, and like obviously fact check me if I'm wrong. But he went from doing like this horror movie suspense thriller thing over to like this whimsical, heartfelt like children's movie. And he wanted, because he goes so deep into the content that he does, he was like dealing with all this darkness and depth of like horror and stuff to move to something lighter. But the way that he encapsulates just...
He did The Ring?
Yeah, the way that he encapsulates motifs and... I watched a video about him talking about coming up with the theme for Chani. Is it Chani? Chani, yeah. And he's like, he started with desert, and he started with Arrakis, and then he started with pieces of Paul, and he put it all together to have this like through line throughout all of it, because of how the women specifically in Dune have such a huge role. From what I understand, again, third party outside knowledge of like what I've been told and heard from different sources of how important like the feminine is within, even though it's a very masculine driven story. And I mean, kind of.
Well, within the sheafs or whatever you call them, there's like where they actually live. The
Sieges, yeah.
Like that's where, you know, the women are kind of a little bit in control, if you will, and the men go out and
they do the thing, and you have the divine masculine, divine feminine, but he does such an amazing job with coming up with these beautiful musical lilts and motifs that have such an impactful emotional experience, and you feel it. And when he's riding the worm for the first time, and like just like
pure immersion, dude.
You're just
that
like,
was probably my best moment. Like I was so immersed. I was just like, holy shit.
So riding the worm was
but also what I really loved was, because having read the book, I remember feeling a little bored with the second half of the book. So I was like, how's this movie gonna do? And this is where I love the movie. There's a few parts, like you said, that now you're bringing up. I'm like, yeah, they could have been done better, all that. But holy crap, like riding the worm, but even like the sieges and stuff like that, like had almost like a different flavor. It wasn't just like Arabic fully. It was more of like Iraq kind of. And well, they filmed it in Jordan, but like I almost thought it looked like cuneiform on or cuneiform, or however you say it, on the, also like very ancient, like more ancient than
anything that is currently standing. Yes.
Something that I saw in a interview with Hans Zimmer is he didn't stop writing after the first movie.
Right.
He took the energetic wave of what he was creating for this film with his creative crew and literally birthed the second film.
He kept working
with the soundtrack before it was even done. Denis was like, "What are you doing, Hans?"
He kept
he's like riding this passion wave. And
he kept sending
you feel it from everyone who works on the project, this wave of passion. And it's really imbued, especially with filming on location and really doing it justice and doing it well so that people can then take the information in. I think that, like, I love that there's a rebirth of this tale because the 1984 version isn't as captivating from a spiritual grabbing perspective of, like, this is the path of not only the hero's journey, but, like, how different... cult is not quite the right word for the Bene Gesserits because it's like deep mysticism. This is what the deep mysticism of life has on our society. And we're so far removed from it. Like, this is the art that comes from being so connected to that passion point. Thanks. Jump in. Go ahead.
So I definitely want to go back to the importance of the feminine in the Dune universe. So Well, yes.
Jessica.
Love me some Jessica.
Talk about Jessica.
So Lady Jessica was inspired by Frank Herbert's wife. And
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah. So she was behind so much of the brilliance of the Bene Gesserit, and not just literally, like, she had ideas about the order and what it means to be psychic and intuitive and a divine order of women that are channeling wisdom that nobody else in the Dune universe has access to but them.
That makes sense why it was so well written, is because it was based on a person.
Yeah. And she basically, while Frank went into his creative zone and basically had to ignore his children, and you can read about the children of Frank Herbert's experience of their father.
While he was writing.
And yet, didn't one of them continue the books?
Yes.
After he died?
But his wife, and I apologize for not knowing her name off the top of my head, but she basically supported Frank and the children and the family and the home to the point where Dune could become real.
Sure.
So she was the backbone,
Holding the container.
holding the container so that
Badass
Frank
woman
could
right there.
execute
Wow.
while being an inspiration. While she was also the
His second
inspiration.
wife.
Calling in a Lady Jessica.
Her name is Beverly Ann Stewart, just for
Amazing. So
Yesterday was International Women's Day, so
Yes.
or no, sorry,
2 days
Friday.
ago.
Sorry.
but she became ill during this process of him writing the books, and it forced Frank to really address how important to his life and his creativity and the family, how important she was to him, which is why after book 1 and 2, the Bene Gesserit and the characters within the Bene Gesserit come to the forefront.
Cool.
Throughout the rest of the series.
She actually passed in 1984.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah,
Wow.
Wow.
fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Fun facts.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have a producer who works on finding out all the cool little tidbits.
You want to talk a little Sardaukar?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Warrior
do.
Culture.
Let's go.
And just for a fact check, they don't actually belong to the Emperor. They are a third party mercenary independent class that have their own planet.
But do they get?
Solusa Secundus?
But the Emperor uses them as his personal guard,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
I think that's
He
how they
buys them.
That's how
outright.
they portray it. I think that's how it's
It's
portrayed.
a lot like
prison.
Australia in that it was, well, I think it still is to a large...
Prison planet.
It's a prison planet.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
It's a prison
You got it.
planet.
Good job.
And I guess after hundreds of years of doing a prison planet, you're like, these guys could be our slaves. Why don't we train some warriors? And so they figured out how to do that. I think something like 80% of those selected die in the training process. You don't make it. I think in the first movie they show all these people hanging upside down and these crucifixes being bled out in the rain. It's things like that where you're fed these fundamentalist views. So they create fanatics that support the emperor. They're bought and owned to be the emperor's army, and they don't want doubt. They don't want dissent. They don't want fear. They don't want. You are a killing machine to serve the will of the emperor, and they do that by hanging people upside down, bleeding. Like, here's the belief. Here's your will. Let's see who comes out for like decades.
Jeez.
And if you make it, if your psyche makes it, if your soul makes it through that process, along with, physical training and knives and all that kind of stuff, you become a Sardaukar soldier, and they're treated actually pretty well. They get money, estates, women, like anything they want.
At what cost?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
at a big cost.
I think you see that in a lot of different representations too. The warrior class, like what it takes to get to that level is like unthinkable. And if you make it through those trials and you get to that upper echelon, that level, and you make it to that top few, then you kind of like win the lottery, so to speak, of you now get to have a better condition based on that experience. You kind of like win that, but the cost is so high.
And they have like, I think wires sewn into their hair. So if they get captured, they can pull some of wire from their hair and like kill people with it. They have blades under their toenails. They have all kinds of like genetic stuff inside their body that they can extract and like mix with something else to make poison.
Wow.
They're really, really
Is this from the prequels?
Engineered, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
They're really, really something.
Wow.
I loved that. A small kind of point that I liked. Also kind of a mix of like, we're in this futuristic world, but also that old school, like medieval, where the scene where they're fighting and the wind, or the sandstorm from the explosion and just the own storm. And then the Sardaukar, just the standard bearer, you're like, why is he even a standard bearer anymore? But yeah, you can see that he's just like, at all costs, I'm going to trudge forward.
I wish Denis put a little bit more into the lore. They were just kind of like stormtroopers.
Yeah.
In this one.
I think, especially in the second one.
Yeah.
I think in the first one, they gave a little bit more respect to the fierceness of it, because again, Duncan Idaho.
Yeah.
And like you said
and what is the other guy's?
Gurney Halleck.
I love Gurney.
Yeah, but they did do that one scene that you mentioned earlier, Ian, where it's very clear when the Atreides are getting, like, the coup is happening with the Harkonnens, and the Atreides, it's like one line of Atreides soldiers, maybe 10 to 12, they're smoking wave upon wave of Harkonnens.
They're holding them off. Yeah.
And then the Sardaukar come in, and in seconds it's done.
Well, you remember Duncan Idaho talking, he's like, Sardaukar come, like,
he's
it's
like,
time to get serious.
He's like, that they're here. He's like, cross blades with the Sardaukar once, that you probably
and yet then the depiction of the Fremen, that like when Paul gets on the Emperor's ship, there's all the Sardaukar there, and normally you'd be afraid. But what's cool is you see the Sardaukar, they have no fear.
I wonder if they would have been a little bit more aggressive in the movie. He comes like within this far from.
Yeah, I feel like they would have attacked on sight.
That was a little too close.
Bro.
That's a little too close.
little too close. But and obviously they made some changes in the movie to the book, like you have told me, around like who kills who, and like how the baby who's not born yet is born and is actually the person who kills the
that whole thing is
the daughter.
Yeah,
she's really like the chosen one, right?
Alia, because she drank the water of life essentially with her mother, starts to age faster, and she's I think she's born within a few weeks after drinking at full size and health, a few weeks after drinking the water of life. And she's born with all the wisdom of all the Bene Gesserits and like an adult and like a supernatural person as a baby, like as a child. And what was I going to say? Yeah, she's a badass character. She's really like Paul's equivalent in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely excited to see.
Does she have a lot of play in Dune Messiah?
It's all about her.
Seriously, about half.
That's awesome.
Yeah, more about her than Paul.
And that's what I got when I was reading the wiki. It was essentially being like, everyone thought Paul was him, and then it turns, and even though it's supposed to be a guy to like pierce this veil, she ends up really being the one that's even helps guide Paul a little bit. Like they're supposed to work together, right?
Yeah, I think they don't have a lot of conflict in Messiah. They coexist well, but she kills Vladimir Harkonnen in the original Dune.
Right. So they shifted some things because obviously they moved the timeline in between Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 to like 4 months as opposed to 4 years. Right. So there's like this huge separation, and then obviously you're making that for artistic decisions, and you can tell a story in a different.
Also, Paul and Chani have a baby that's killed in the Spice Wars.
Right.
Before he drinks the water of life, they have a baby, and he's killed in the Spice Wars.
The other thing around Paul and like his, in the first movie, it's a big thing about accepting what does it mean to be an Atreides and all that. So they kind of set that, but in the books, I feel like that not only his spiritual prescience, and then also accepting. In the book, they show it through like, I have to be a Harkonnen. And he mentions it once, but I feel like there's a little more inner turmoil around that in the books. That then it's like, the only way through is to really embrace being all aspects of himself, which is now he's kind of the leader of the Fremen. But he also has to still embrace the Atreides, knowing that he's also Harkonnen.
Chris, are you saying he needs to embrace his fate?
Yes. Very much so. He picks his nose. Oh, it's forced.
That's what you got, Eden.
Well, so we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to figure out how to land this beautiful spaceship that we've built. Any closing thoughts? Any things that have impacted you personally? Anything that is coming up to be shared about this tale, and probably a part 2.
I was going to say, I think that's a part. We'll definitely see that. Just like the movies, we need a part 2.
Do you want to do a little round of...
What about, I'd love to hear from y'all moments that got you the most lit.
Let's do it.
I definitely... The knife fight. The knife fight at the very end of the movie between Paul and Fade. And it was just a knife fight, but something hit me really deeply about the level of conviction between these two characters, the level of skill that both have cultivated. And it doesn't matter how virtuous and heroic Paul is, he's in fucking danger of getting killed because the Harkonnens are so dangerous, and what that forces him to engage with inside himself in order to become victorious. Right. It was like the scene with Jamis in the first one, but on steroids.
Yeah, that was epic.
Yeah.
Since you stole mine, I'll do another one. I will say another one of the moments that I was like living for was when he steps up. He walks into like the council meeting, whatever, in the south.
Stilgar?
No, Stilgar's already there, but he's just like walking in, just like
one with everybody.
Oh, at the end.
So he's walking up, and the guy's like, "You can't be here. You can't talk. Only the leaders in here can talk." And Stilgar's like getting up to like, "Here's my knife. Just like kill me."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Dude, why would I spill the blood of some? Like, why would I take away? Like, it's like breaking my own sword before going into battle. That's stupid. I'm not going to play these stupid games."
It's like his father did in the first one through fear.
Right. Yeah. And so he's like, "Dude, I'm not going to do that." He's like, "Well, then you can't talk to him." He's like, "Who's going to test me?
Yeah.
Come at me, bro." And he just comes and commands this entire room of standing in that fervent energy of like, I'm here to do this thing. All of this stuff's all well and good, but I'm here to shake stuff up. And if you have a problem with that, come at me, bro. A little bit. And then everyone just like stands up, and then he does his little psychic Jedi mind tricks on the dude, and everyone's like, he's the leader. Oh my God. And then they rally behind his cause. But like that moment where I think people get tripped up in thinking, oh, this is how it's always been done, so therefore I have to continue this way, when presented with a situation where there needs to be growth and evolution. Yes. Like there needs to be a shaking up of something for something new to come in. You can't just keep perpetuating the same if you're wanting something new and different. And that moment really encapsulated that for me, and I thought it was a really powerful transport.
Absolutely.
For me, that's kind of the same theme around my thinking about it.
Like, what got you most lit?
Yes, the writing, the worm was like immersion, like sick, but honestly, the meaning around when he stomps the emperor and is like, kiss me, because the daughter's like, spare his life and I'll be your willing wife. And there's, the whole backdrop around of like, I need to embrace, like, now that I know I'm Harkonnen, I need to be Harkonnen to beat the Harkonnen. And it's that, bringing Kabbalistically, he's really embracing the middle pillar, like heart and like mercy and severity, because it's like, no, the most, and embracing his fate, his power. He's so in his power. He's like, no, like I'm not going to kill you, but I'm also going to make you like kiss the ring. And yeah, there's going to be a whole another conflict afterwards. But that, like, even after he got stabbed, even after, he did defeat Fade, but like, that was just a really big, especially when he stomps, and you can tell it just like instills fear in everybody. He's
demanding it in the moment.
That just hit me around that, like, pure power, but in a balanced, like, merciful way in a sense. It wasn't just pure, like, slit your throat.
Right. Maximus, Star Lord, Renegade Falcon.
Oh, we're going to Eden.
Say pass if you don't have anything.
I think something that I was speaking to earlier was about the impact of mysticism on a society. I think that it's this particular story is something that we've never seen before in our history of mankind, and we try to put these different archetypes onto it, and we can do it for a time or a period of time, but I think that it has a lasting impact or imprint on us. That,
what was a moment from the movie or from that kind of embodied that when you were watching it, if you can think of one?
Yeah, speaking to some of the Bene Gesserit, I think we've been living from this patriarchal and before that a matriarchal society, and I think like the end point of the movie is like we're starting to come into what it means to live from a place of divine union, middle pillar. What does that mean for us as a society, not just as individuals? And that is a brilliant question to be having. Thanks. Hi. Yeah, I think it's just a brilliant melding of those two forces of brilliance and beauty and good. So that's
Amen.
fine.
There you go.
That's my 2 cents. Thanks, Max.
Maximus Star-Lord Renegade Falcon.
The most lit in the movie or the books or either?
Either. I think it's just like
inspiring.
In relationship to Dune. Like when you're talking about Dune, what got you the most lit? And it can be a specific scene or it can be a larger
the telling of the importance of mysticism in a story that's digestible by the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The importance of the telling of mysticism in our human story in a way that's digestible for the rest of the world. That's the thing that gets me the most lit.
Amazing. Cool. Because it reaches like we're looking at even just who's sitting on this couch, like different walks of life and different ways of thinking about the world and how it can touch so many people. We were talking about before we started filming around the box office draw and how it's crushing.
Yeah, more than Barbie or Oppenheimer.
On opening weekend. And I think you were saying you're rather surprised by that.
Yeah, the reach is impressive.
But to me, I'm not really that surprised because of that reason. Because I think if you're a sci-fi fan, you're going to go see it. If you are a film fan, just from like a cinematic perspective, you're going to go see it. If you are into really rich, like Game of Thronesian, like house dynamic, like bickering, feuding type of, you watch The Real Housewives of Atlanta, you're probably going to get into it because it has that backstabbery type of stuff. If you're into martial arts films, you're going to go see it. If you're into, like, you know what I mean? Action film, like you're going to go see it. So I think it has a little bit of everything for people. And I think the way that you're describing it as well is you have this like, makes the medicine go down smoother, palette, where it's like you're getting this deeper, rich meaning of a messaging.
It's got an archetypal,
but it's not over the top. And I wonder if the studio dialed it down a little bit so that it's more, digestible for people that are uncomfortable with spirituality.
I mean, probably. That makes sense. I have a very staunch opposition to organized religion.
I think they should have gone for it. I think people would have loved it.
Yeah. I mean,
the Bene Gesserit are like nuns, right?
Yeah. They kind of go for it with the Bene Gesserit, and they go for it in some places, but just fucking go for it. I think people would love it.
But and then with the Fremen, you see this kind of like our ideas of, like North African.
Yeah, the religion fundamentalist stuff is, I think, well played out.
Mohammedan kind of like influences around things.
So I definitely think there's going to be a part 2. Definitely, people who are listening, let us know what you thought and what you would like to hear us go into more on a second pass. And we could obviously talk about this all day. Max, thanks for being our first official guest.
Thank you. Talk about it.
Yeah, we really appreciate to have you, and we'll have you on for many more things. I know you have a background in psychology, and you do some really important work working with disenfranchised groups of people on a regular basis, and I think that would be a really interesting thing to talk to you too about, like the mental health state of the world.
Yeah, mental health state of the world and our prison system I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, you're working with them, doing authentic relating, and I think that's really cool. So again, thank you so much for being on. Thanks for everyone who was listening. We really appreciate you tuning in and checking this out. Much more to come. We'll be doing a part 2 for sure. And let us know what you thought.
We'll see you next time, everybody.
Awesome.